But first, a lot can happen in a week. The president can again shake up his legal team and then have one of those new lawyers contradict him. And a fired congressional chaplain can get his job back. Mirabile dictu. That's for you, David. Here to make sense of it all, the analysis of Shields and Brooks. That's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. We should explain David Brooks just back from Italy. So
apparently where you've been studying Sir Thomas Aquinas.
That's right. Exactly.
I thought he'd been to Latin America.
We've had this spectacle or this week or this scene this week of the president getting a new lawyer, the star of his legal team, Rudy Giuliani, coming out and contradicting him. Today, the president said, well, he'll get his facts straight. He's new on the job. And then Giuliani issuing this clarification. David, what do you make of all this?
Well, I mean, when one person tells a lie, it's what a tangled web we weave. When you've got 60 or 70 people doing it, it's like a universe of tangle. And so we've got just a universe of when did he pay off, who did the payoff, did Trump know, when did he know? Frankly, I find it all secondary. I mean, the headline here is that the President of the United States allegedly paid hush money to a porn star. I mean, what else do we need for the scandal? That sort of covers it for me. And so if people are willing to tolerate that in their president, then whether the money counts as a campaign donation or not, which is one of the things being argued, to me that's not secondary, it's tertiary or something else. The main fact is we have come to this point in our country where that seems normal.
So those little details don't matter. Mark, what do you think?
I welcome David back, but I have to disagree in this sense. The Access Hollywood tape during the campaign showed that it was not a big factor to at least Trump voters at that point. But I think I'll go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis, and President John Kennedy dispatched former Secretary of State Dean Acheson to brief President Charles de Gaulle of France on what the United States had found that the Soviets had placed in the way of missiles in Cuba. And after the briefing, Dean Acheson asked General de Gaulle, do you want me to show you the secret photos that we have? And he said, no, no, no. Said General de Gaulle, the word of the President of the United States is all that I need. Now, fast forward. I mean, we have a man who is just incapable of telling the truth. I mean, he, less than a month ago, on Air Force One, asked by the press, do you know anything about this payment, the $130,000? No. And now, of course, he does. And it reached the point where the Wall Street Journal, the Bible of American business, which has been sympathetic to President Trump, generally, especially on his economic policy, said he's compiling a record editorially that increases the likelihood that few will believe him. Mr. Trump should worry that Americans will stop believing anything he says. And, you know, the word of the President of the United States is not something to trifle with, and he has trifled with it, and he's fractured it.
David, you were outside the Beltway, way outside the Beltway, and I know that you think that perhaps we're getting a little carried away with this focus on Stormy Daniels and payments and all this sort of thing. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, well, you know, I do think the norms that he's violated and the way he's degraded the public debate in the nation are a serious thing. We've talked about that for 3 years. And yet, when you think about the important things that have happened this week, probably the China-U.S. trade talks were a very big deal. The North Korea-South Korea thing is promising all of a sudden. The economy's going great. And so apparently a lot of people have made the calculation, you know, he's got always a bunch of scandal that those people in Washington care about. But when you think about the big substantive things, things seem to be going fine. And that's the calculation a lot of people are making. And there are times when I think we get a little overhyped up about whatever Rudy Giuliani said this morning. And we do lose sight in Washington of things like the China trade talks. And I hate to sound like the earnest, you know, middle-brow guy, but that's the calculation people have made. And I think that the threat to our norms is serious and just poisonous to our country. But other people have said, no, I just care about the substance. And this week, at least, the substance is pretty good on what the Trump administration has achieved.
The lowest unemployment rate since President Bill Clinton is certainly impressive and certainly welcome. And no American can be anything other than happy about it. But the presidency is historically and actually, above all else, a place of moral leadership. And you lose that. And I don't care how big the Dow Jones is. I don't care what the corporate profits are. I'm not quite as sanguine about the economy as David is. I mean, I think the tax cut is the equivalent economically of catnip. We know that 86 million middle-class families will have their taxes raised, and we know that 83% of the tax cuts will go to the top 1%. When it's settled, that's really not unimportant, and it certainly affects the way that people live. But I thought the piece with Jim Tankersley, we're still seeing where wages are not rising, to me, I'm just worried that the presidency itself will be a diminished and tarnished office, and we'll have tough reposing trust in that person.
It will be, and the effects will be long-lasting, and they'll be devastating for faith in politics and for the society. But those of us who are critical of Donald Trump can't hide from the facts that go against our story. And so I was against the Trump tax cuts, but the early evidence is that they're working better than I thought. And so in the first quarter, among S&P companies, capital expenditures are up 39%. That's a 7-year high. That's far higher than a lot of us thought. Stock buybacks, which is just giving people to shareholders, that's only 16%. So the evidence from just the first quarter seems to be that what the Trump people told us would happen is happening, that companies are reinvesting the money. A lot of the things Trump said about North Korea are terrifying. And yet, if it has an effect of unnerving the North Koreans so they're more flexible, and we don't know if that's the case, but there's some positive implications, well, then maybe some of those terrifying tweets had some effect. And so it's important to oppose what's opposable and what's reprehensible and offensive, and we've been doing that, as I say, for 3 years. But it's also important to see reality. And the more serious opposition will frankly be on disastrous policies or not disastrous policies.
Well, it's sort of the mix of the sort of the substance and also what's going on. The sort of the scandal is at play. Also, we're going to get into next week the beginning of the midterm season in earnest as we start this string of primaries next week. Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, North Carolina, and we're seeing in the Republican primaries a lot of these candidates trying to glom on to President Trump as much as possible. I think, does that surprise you, given where we were a year ago and where we seem to be going with the president, that the Republican candidates are running toward him?
Yeah, I thought that as the scandals magnified, as the lies magnified, people would drift away from Donald Trump, including Republicans. But he's got 89, 90% support among Republicans, so that's not happening. And then I thought, well, eventually we'll snap back and we'll revert to the normal standards of civility in public life. But I was just watching ads in West Virginia, this candidate, Blankenship, the guy who did some jail time for a prison massacre, or a series of deaths in the prisons, or in the mines.
Coal mines.
His ad, apparently he's decided that Donald Trump isn't vulgar enough. And so the ad is crude, quasi-racialist, making wild accusations about Mitch McConnell and cocaine. I mean, there are really zero standards in this ad. Now, he's not winning. He's coming in third so far in the Republican primaries. But if that's the standard to which politics has descended, then Donald Trump was just John the Baptist, and we're going to see a lot worse.
Politics is the most imitative of all human activities, with the possible exception of political journalism. And I'd just say that when a candidate wins, I mean, Joe McCarthy spawned a whole generation of imitators. And there are people still running for state representative in Massachusetts today who say again and again because John Kennedy said again and again. But it should be no surprise that it's a race to the bottom. It was Donald Trump who announced that the President of the United States was born in Kenya. And insisted that was true. I mean, it was Donald Trump who told lies and paid no price for it. In fact, it was rewarded. So, I mean, it is imitative. It is derivative. What's interesting is that the two other candidates in West Virginia, Evan Jenkins, the congressman, and Patrick Morrisey, the attorney general, are kind of hitting each other over the head with 2x4s. I mean, saying you're not deserving of Trump's support. You're not a real Trumpian. Blankenship, is David's right, convicted, spent a year in jail, $250,000 fine for 29 miners dying on his watch, and his violation of mine safety standards and law. you know, he was leading until last week. So I don't know what's going to happen in the primary. But
You know what's interesting though? A lot of the national campaigns are so ugly, and yet you go to the municipal and gubernatorial campaigns, and they're a lot better. I met a guy, Mike Duggan, who's the mayor of Detroit, and he's a guy who said, you know, they tried to run us-them tribal politics against him, and he said, hey, if you want to run that, don't vote for me. But I'm just going to fix the streetlights. I'm going to fix the city. And it was, let's put all that stuff away. He got massive support from the African-American community, and people wanted a higher level. They just wanted a guy who would run the city well. And so you can get depressed, especially at the national level. The paradox is on the state and the city level. Often the politics is working pretty good.
you know, David makes a very good point, and I think probably the strongest challenger to Donald Trump would be somebody who's been a successful mayor or governor, who's actually brought people together, who has achievements, who's worked with the other side. I mean, senators are one of 100. They don't make history, they make speeches. You know, they cast votes, and they go on television. And governors and mayors really run something and have a track record. And boy, I think we'll be looking for a track record in 2020.
Let me tell you, we've got about a minute and a half left. The other story, the Speaker of the House in Massachusetts said all politics is local. The current Speaker is sort of learning the lesson of that. He tried to fire the chaplain, uproar in his precinct to the House of Representatives, and now the chaplain's back. What do you make of this, Mark?
I make of it political ineptitude. There is speculation. I've done some reporting on speculation that Speaker Ryan was bowing to the interests of some in the Freedom Caucus who didn't want Father Conroy there because he was, quote, too liberal. Apolitical is what he's been. His one provocative statement was to offer a prayer that the tax bill not pick winners and losers, but confer benefits and burdens equally and justly upon us. I mean, the Catholic preferential option for the poor is central to it. He gets fired, and then there was a genuine backlash and almost spontaneous wildfire, and Paul Ryan had to back down.
David?
Apparently, Jesus Christ had a low Freedom Caucus score. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, which is to be the conscience. I will give Paul Ryan a little credit. At least he backed down. We don't see backing down too often, so he admitted a mistake, and at least he backed down. But the pastor was doing what he was supposed to be doing.
David Brooks, we got to leave it there. David Brooks, Mark Shields, thanks so much.